This is Akashvani. In the program Countrywide, now we bring you an exclusive interview with Shombi Sharp, UN Resident Coordinator in India on G-20 Summit and India-UN relations. The interviewer is Diksha Saxena, Akashvani correspondent.
India is one of the founding members of the United Nations. From 1945 till now, the relationship has grown multifold. United Nations is involved in multiple activities in India. Today, we have UN Resident Coordinator for India, Mr. Shombi Sharp, in the studio to discuss more about G20, UN-India partnership and the road ahead. Mr. Sharp, welcome to Akashvani News.
Thank you so much, Diksha. मुझे यहाँ बुलाने के लिए धन्यवाद.
The relationship between India and UN dates back to 1945. India was one of the founding members of the United Nations. Analyzing the partnership today, in your opinion, what are the areas we have made improvements and what are the key areas that need to be worked on?
India's relationship with the UN has been deep and committed throughout in so many different ways. India's been a real champion of multilateralism, of dialogue as a key towards achieving shared global goals. And in fact, the mantra Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, this really is one world, one family, captures the spirit. For example, Hansa Mehta, famously as an Indian delegate during the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, insisted on changing the opening language to, all men are born free and equal, to all human beings are born free and equal. So it's just really been truly an incredible partnership, and that continues to this day. If we look at areas where, we've really had great successes, I mean, again, there are so many, but because of the importance of India on the world scale, India now the largest country in the world, the greatest youth generation, India's local impacts have impacts at the global level as well. So many other areas. India is an increasing leader in climate action. The Panchamrit targets from COP26, the Prime Minister brought forward 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030, meeting half of India's electricity needs by renewable by then as well. Incredible investments in renewable energy, but also electric mobility, electric vehicles. These sorts of things are really impacting the world as well and really strengthening multilateralism also. I think in this 76th year of independence, we see another thread, which is that India has always been a champion of international peace and security in many different ways. India has been the largest supporter of UN peacekeeping, providing more troops and personnel than any other country, has been a real champion for preventing and fighting against terrorism also. And then finally, let me just mention that India is also a real sort of a leading voice for the Global South, a champion of South-South cooperation. So not only bringing the issues of the Global South to the top table in international development and diplomacy, but also increasingly, becoming a source of provider of development solutions for developing countries as well, on the basis of proven methods to deliver development at scale here in India as well.
Recently, it was revealed in a report that 415 million people have come out of poverty in 15 years in India. It was hailed by many, including the UN. In your opinion, what led to the achievement of this feat?
Yeah, so, there are a number of different factors there. What we see is that you have, first of all, India has embraced the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, as a kind of a conceptual and organizing framework more than any other country I've seen, actually, which is very quite impressive, and aligned the concept of cooperative federalism and getting states, kind of working together through the SDG index that Niti Aayog leads, and we in the UN and the Resident Coordinator's Office have been pleased to support. So it's really bringing evidence-based metrics to measuring, monitoring progress on development. And the SDG index is an important one where different states can sort of look and compare and see how they're doing with other states as well. And I've seen that in action. I've traveled around, been with states, the development planning committees and such, and how important it is. But I think then it's the partnership between the state level initiatives and the center. And we've seen so many truly important mission mode, I know is a popular phrase, and it's really important, that have identified key challenges, for example, I mean, the biggest challenges, as in many countries, in India, in terms of SDGs, we see the bigger challenges in SDG 2, nutrition, and 5, gender equality. But so the country recognized that and has put a huge amount of investment into national missions, the targeted public delivery system, providing food aid, which was really important during the COVID pandemic, providing resilience, really investing in women as well. I would say it's leadership having these goals in mind, evidence-based development approaches, technology as well, digital public infrastructures played an important role, and then really measuring, monitoring, and investing in those programs, which has really produced results.
Mr. Shah, I would like to bring your focus back to G20. As we all know, India is holding the presidency of the G20 and the theme is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means world is one family. The theme itself suggests inclusivity. Please elaborate on this and also throw some light on the key focus area of the G20 under India's presidency.
First of all, it's important to look at the broader context that this G20 presidency in which it's taking place. And, this is one in which we see a world facing what we call a polycrisis, multiple overlapping, cascading crises with devastating impacts on developing countries, on poorer communities, within countries as well. We see war, we see the triple planetary crisis, pollution, biodiversity loss, climate change. At the same time, geopolitical divisions are kind of foiling the ability to come together as a global community to agree how do we address these challenges. And that's where I think that India's very uniquely positioned to be leading the G20 now at this very moment. India was the best place, has the kind of, let's say, the most relationship capital, the most bridges of trust across the global south, G7, the east, west, north, south, all of these divides. And India's G20 mantra, the one earth, one family, one future, again, really encapsulates that. India brings the concept of unity and diversity, being one of the most incredibly diverse countries and having strengths in that, and having demonstrated so much success in targeting leaving no one behind, as I was just sort of mentioning as well. So, really, India, I think we are grateful that India has taken on this challenge at this very difficult moment in time. And we're very optimistic that India is producing the results that the world needs and will be bringing, there's a very nice, in a way, handshake almost between India's G20 Leaders Summit, which happens 9th and 10th in September, and then just about 8 days later, the world comes together in New York at the SDG Summit, the General Assembly, to take stock of where we are halfway to 2030. And what we see is that we're not doing very well globally. And in fact, only 12% of these SDGs goals that we have are on track. So India bringing the SDG focus through the G20 presidency to New York will really be an important fillip to the global conversation. India's articulating its focus on the SDGs in many different ways. In fact, it's so aligned with the SDGs, I like to call India's presidency, I like to call it an SDG 20. And we've seen this now manifest through a number of different important results. The India's G20 has produced now an SDG action plan on accelerating progress on the SDGs, which is going to be vitally important to bring transformative multipliers to New York for the global conference. India has created the first independent expert group on multilateral development bank reforming the international financial architecture, looking at ways to dramatically increase the amount of resources that the international financial institutions can bring to developing countries who are facing so much debt distress, and respond to the Secretary General's call for SDG stimulus as well. And I think India's, as was set out by the Prime Minister in the beginning, to be inclusive. India's G20 presidency has been the most inclusive. There are more countries engaged and more partner institutions engaged than ever before. For example, bringing in the African Union possibly might be agreed. As a member, we have to see. Or, for example, creating perhaps a empowerment of women full working group as well might also come to fruition. India created the very first disaster risk reduction working group as well, recognizing the importance of what's special about India's presidency is that it's not just wishful thinking. India is bringing credibility to the table with this leadership. India is serving as almost a sort of an innovation lab for different approaches, for scalable development solutions for developing countries, and showing that they can work.
Mr. Sharp, one of the focus area of Sustainable Development Goals 30 is on climate crisis. How much has India put life to combating the climate crisis?
I would say, again, despite all of the various crises that we're facing, the climate crisis is the greatest existential one. And, we see that humanity continues to wage war on nature, as the Secretary General says, and nature is striking back. It's no longer, let's say, global warming in a sense, it's global boiling. And we've just seen hottest days on record ever, hottest month on record. It's truly frightening. So in the context of that, India is playing a really important role in demonstrating how a country can both address, significant development priorities and significant climate action, be a leader in terms of climate action. So, as I mentioned, the Panchamrit targets announced by Prime Minister Modi at COP26 are truly, truly transformational. 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity, non-fossil fuel, reducing carbon emissions by 1 billion tons. These sorts of things will still take a lot of work to achieve. That's something that I don't think there's a country in the world where you see so much investment. And, this will be the game changer. As the Secretary General said when he was here in the end of last year in Mumbai, he noted that, India is the country that can make the SDGs a reality. Because India, we estimate, in fact, upwards of almost half of some of the global goals need to be met here, will be met here in India. So one can quite literally say that as India achieves the SDGs, the world can achieve the SDGs. But the world needs India to be leading. And climate action is really a particularly important area where India is leading. And digital public infrastructure is also an important sort of tool and means that India is demonstrating at a scale that the world's never seen. I think there are more financial digital transactions than something like China, US combined. The numbers are truly astounding.
In fact, India has been very vocal of its concerns on terrorism, though it might not be a very comfortable issue to be discussed. But in your opinion, how UN as a whole should act more on it?
Yes, so look, India is definitely, as I would say, one of several sort of strategic thrusts in terms of supporting international peace and security. India has been clearly a leader in terms of combating terrorism, both, bilaterally through national initiatives and through India's leadership role in the UN. Now, fighting terrorism is top priority of the UN and of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. In fact, one of his first acts in office when he came to office was to create the Office on Counterterrorism, which kind of enhanced the overall coordination of UN and member state counterterrorism efforts. There's also the UN Security Council, of course, and there's the Counterterrorism Committee within the Security Council, which has agreed a number of important resolutions. India was just last year president of the Security Council and in fact hosted a special meeting of the Counterterrorism Committee here in India, which led to the Delhi Declaration, which really sort of helped come forward with a set of commitments that modernized counterterrorism efforts. India's leadership for the Delhi Declaration was an important step forward in terms of modernizing counterterrorism. And as the Secretary General said, the United Nations is very clear. And he said, quote, that terrorism is absolute evil and has no place in today's world. No cause, no incident can justify terrorism ever. And he very much appreciated India's leadership on that.
I would like to end this discussion on a very personal note by asking you have been in India for almost 2 years now. Please tell us that one thing which has touched your heart, which you will carry always in your memories from this very beautiful country.
First of all, it's impossible to say just one thing, but one of the reasons I'm happy to be here at All India Radio is I remember the very first day I landed in India, November 14th. The first thing I did was to download All India Radio app and started listening to All India Radio. So it became, the theme song became synonymous for me with morning. But truly the best, I love so much about India, the people, the culture, the food, the architecture, so many UNESCO World World Heritage Sites. It's just unbelievable diversity. I'm meeting incredibly inspirational people, young people, really transforming their communities. Mujhe Bharat ke log bahut pasand hai.
The lack of time doesn't allow us to carry forward this insightful discussion ahead today. We will keep discussing important issues concerning India and the world in our conversation in future. Thank you, Mr. Sharp, for your valuable time and for joining us here in Akashvani studio. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Bahut dhanyawad.
You were listening to an exclusive interview with Shombi Sharp, UN Resident Coordinator in India, on G20 Summit and India-UN relations. The interviewer was Diksha Saxena, Akashvani correspondent. The program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani.